Welcome. Thank you for attending the Program Monitoring Validations training session. Today's training session is on LEAs providing private nonprofit equitable services and the LEA documenting those PNP equitable services amounts. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas ESCs, LEAs, and participating private schools, and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are, therefore, advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. To ensure overall compliance with program requirements, LEA should refer to the program guide and/or other program-related resources that reference the multiple forms of documentation required to be maintained locally. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation that are required to be maintained locally. Please note that due to COVID-19, documentation for virtual meetings is an acceptable form of documentation. Given the increased use of virtual meeting environments, participant rosters that include the meeting title, meeting date, and stakeholder names and roles would be acceptable substitutes for the more traditional sign-in sheets. This eliminates the need of a participant signature. LEA staff should review the most current Program Monitoring Validations Process Handbook. It includes introduction, general information, a timeline of the Program Monitoring Validation process from the point of LEAs being notified of selection through the TEA final results being shared with LEAs. In addition, LEAs must follow the instructions for submitting the documentation through the Federal Program Compliance Program Monitoring Validations Work App. The PMV process handbook also provides resources and tools to help LEAs with specific program guidance for selected validation item and a seamless transition through the submission process. This is a snapshot of the relevant pages of the handbook for the LEA's selected program monitoring validations item. LEA should review the handbook for suggested documentation, guidance, and submission instructions. For the validation, the LEA may review the handbook for documentation requested, instructions for assembling documentation, the documentation review process, as well as resources and statute references. LEAs must provide documentation that they provided timely and meaningful consultation with participating private schools. These are continued pages of the handbook sections of that requirement in which the LEA is being validated. It continues with statute references, specific program provisions and assurances, compliance report requirements, and TEA contact information for questions. LEAs must submit documentation from the past year through the Federal Program Compliance Division's Program Monitoring Validations Work App. The ESA Section 1117 provides a statutory requirement for Title I, Part A, Equitable Services Amounts. The ESA Section 8501 and Code of Federal Regulations, Title 34, Section 299.7, provides the statutory requirements for Title VIII programs, which includes Title II Part A, Title III Part A, Title IV Part A, and Title IV Part B, Equitable Services Amounts. Program-specific provisions and assurances refer to the Title I Part A private nonprofit and Title VIII private nonprofit equitable services program requirements that may be found in the LEA Consolidated Federal Grant Application on the pages listed on the slide. Program-specific provisions and assurances referring to the Title VIII PMP Equitable Services Program requirements in Sections 8501 through 8504 are found in the LEA Consolidated Federal Grant Application. More specific information may be found by clicking the link of the Title VIII Part F Subpart 1 Private Schools Sections 8501 through 8504. The LEA Compliance Report, PNP Compliance Self-Check, states the LEA documented the PMP Equitable Services Amounts, used and provided a detailed explanation of the Equitable Services Amounts provided to PMP officials for all applicable participating programs. The LEA should submit specific documentation which provides evidence it shared applicable title program equitable service amounts with participating PMP school officials during consultation. Acceptable evidence would include documentation that the LEA informed the PMP officials of the fiscal requirements that include equitable services amounts for one private school campus. A few examples for this documentation could include dated agendas, consultation meeting notes, LEA program summaries, timeline of professional development travel, PMP purchase order request, calendar of program services with equitable services amounts, or other documentation that meets this requirement. The LEA must submit written documentation of the equitable services amounts that was shared with private nonprofit school officials. Issues that could result in an improvement needed status are auditable documentation from a previous school year requested but not submitted. Documentation submitted did not specify the past school's equitable service amounts for participating programs, and documentation did not specify the requested PNP validation requirements. These are just a few of the issues that could result in an improvement needed status for the LEA. Now I will share a few of the program monitoring validations process resources that are available through TEA. We have several program monitoring online resources for the overall process, such as the Program Monitoring Validation Process Handbook, instructions for submitting documentation, training video and training slides, navigating the Smartsheet Work App system, guidance documents for each program and requirement, training videos and slides for each of the program requirements. this is where the district can find all program-related tools and resources for the ESA program monitoring validations. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this short video regarding the selected LEA program monitoring validation. Thank you for all you do for students and families that you serve. You do make a difference. Thank you for attending the session. If there are any questions following this training, feel free to call or send an email to Lenitra Guest, PNP Ombudsman and Title IV Part A Program Director, or reach out to your local ESC. Thank you and have a wonderful day.